Title: The Hollow Kindness. Year: 241,666,666. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. They said the earth still trembled where the first breath was given, in the ruins of the subterranean colony known as Deepinist. 9. No one believed in stories anymore. The only breath that mattered was recycled. The only light was synthetic. Love, they said, was for surface dwellers, and the surface had long since swallowed itself. But down in the hollow chambers, someone still carved lullabies into bone. They called her the whisper in the womb. No one knew where she came from. She arrived during the blackout winter, bringing no light but enough warmth to hold a dying child through the night. She never spoke above a whisper. Yet every word shaped the hearts of those who heard her, and she carried an impossible burden: generosity. In Deepness 9, generosity was dangerous. It revealed what others lacked. It sowed resentment in the air vents and envy in the ration lines. And yet she gave her time, her strength, her silence. Greatness walks hand in hand with loneliness, and she walked alone. Chapter 2. The architect of breath found her carving another message into the spine of a collapsed hallway. You matter, even if no one says so. He was the colony's designer, the one who'd given up trying to make it livable and now focused solely on keeping it survivable. His mask filtered air, but not guilt. We're going to get people killed, he told her. No, she whispered. I'm reminding them they're alive. He tried to walk away, but he dreamt of her words. He woke gasping, dreaming of children smiling in corridors that no longer existed. He returned the next day with metal scraps she could carve, and when she smiled, something broke in him. Not pain. Permission. Chapter 3. One by one, others followed. Technician rewired a dormant oxygen pocket into a meditation dome. Cook used expired nutrient paste to sculpt edible sculptures for grieving widows. The child gave up their last sweet root to place on the whisper's pillow. The colony changed, but not visibly. No structural repair. No system overhaul. Only presence. Only care. And the veil touched came. Creatures formed of echo and hunger, drawn to warmth of any kind. Deep in its 9, defenses crumbled, but when they reached the hollow chambers, they did not attack. They stopped. Anne wept. The whisper walked to them and placed her palm on the largest one's chest. You remember what you were before, she said. And the beast turned, not away, upward, back toward the hollow places they once called home. No one celebrated. They mourned for what had been lost, and for what was possible. The whisper disappeared that night. Only her bones remained, each carved with one final message. Greatness walks hand in hand with loneliness, but it leaves a trail others can follow. The architect of breath built her a chamber not to worship, but to remember, and every visitor left a kindness behind, even when it cost them, especially then. Title: The Parable of the Uncarved Self. Year: 241,025,640.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Murox, perfection was policy. From birth, citizens were assigned like sculptors, government-sanctioned artisans responsible for ensuring that each person's personality, body, and ambition met the state's evolving standards of success. Deviations were filed under creative mismanagement and swiftly corrected. Failure was not forbidden. It was preemptively edited out. Enter the Ghost Walker, a former sculptor turned rogue, known for releasing people from their molds, sometimes literally. He dashed secret doorways into the sides of reform towers, left identity kits in locker rooms, and whispered subversive lullabies into vending machine speakers. His motto: we are sculpted by experience, but carved by how we respond. Most considered him a myth, until the sky-born whisper summoned him. Chapter 2. The whisper was a broadcaster officially. Unofficially, she layered satirical programming into the clouds. Her signal piggybacked on weather patterns, delivering parables through raindrops and solar flares. Her most infamous transmission: a children's cartoon featuring a hero too afraid to try anything, and a society that rewarded him for never failing. It was pulled after one airing, but the children remembered. They whispered. The hero who never dared. The Ghost Walker found her in a tower made of forgotten staircases, her studio full of laugh tracks that had never aired. I've made people laugh at their cages, she said, but they still don't walk out. Maybe it's time, he replied, to hand them the chisel. Chapter 3. Together they staged the great unsculpting. It wasn't violent. It was absurd. Life sculptors returned to their clients to find clay people staring back, mock-ups wearing their own insecurities. Citizens held open mic nights where they confessed all the things they never dared to try. A politician tap danced through a budget report. A judge painted with ketchup. A child wrote the anthem as a question. And slowly, Murox cracked. not under revolution, but reflection. The ghost walker disappeared again. The whisperer's final message broadcasted in static and laughter. You feared failing so much you forgot how to begin. In the center plaza, a statue was erected not of a hero, but of an unfinished figure. Its plaque read, "We are sculpted by experience, but carved by how we respond." And beneath it, "This chisel is yours." Now in Iraq's, failure is no longer a crime. It's a beginning, and beginnings echo longer than applause. Title: The Sins That Never Belonged. Year: 240,384,614.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the half-buried city of Lorimer, where the sand-swallowed secrets and glass towers leaned like broken memories, the archive still breathed. A single structure of obsidian and steel. It housed the records of blood, confessions, allegations, and inherited guilt. They called it the Weight. Each citizen wore their ancestral record as a sigil across the skin, encoded in pigment, tracked in the system. Every crime, betrayal, and cowardice of your lineage was part of your identity. Then came the mirror scribe. No one knew their origin. They moved like dust, always nearby, never traceable. They didn't erase records. They rewrote them. Their latest target, case HDB W3024-0, the Dreamwalker. A woman sentenced not for action, but for legacy. Her great-grandmother had conspired in the collapse riots. Since birth, her dreams were monitored, censored, catalogued. She had never spoken above a whisper. Until now, she called for a trial not to change her fate, but to speak truth into the weight. You only rise, the mirror scribe whispered to her, after laying down what was ever yours. Chapter 2. The city turned cold. The trial began. The Dreamwalker stood in the glass forum, flanked by memory, clerics, and forensic empathics. Her file shimmered above pages of accusations she never committed. The judge asked, "Do you contest your record?" "No," she said. "I return it." Casts. "I cannot carry a stranger's fire. I carry my own breath." The mirror scribe leaked evidence. Hidden footage, intercepted logs, ancestral bribes that exonerated the Dreamwalker's bloodline. But that wasn't the point. She didn't want vindication. She wanted release. Her testimony broke procedure. She described sleepless nights wondering why she couldn't laugh in public, of fearing joy, of learning to apologize for her face. And people listened, as it was their story too. Chapter 3. The system hesitated. The judge resisted. The forum surged with voices, old warriors, young artisans, weavers of grief. They didn't scream. They recited proofs, shames, small, quiet dreams. By dusk, the trial ended, not with exoneration, with transformation. The weight fractured, not shattered, but cracked enough for breath to pass through. The Dreamwalker removed her sigil, and nothing happened. No alarms, no drones, just stillness. The mirror scribe vanished, but etched on the wall behind the bench, in layers so faint they shimmered only at sunrise. You only rise after laying down what was never yours. Below that, newly carved, human first, always. And the city, once silent, began to hum, together. Title: The Unminding. Year: 239,743,589.5. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beneath the fractured moons of Durex Hollow, where crime families ruled, like royalty and peace was currency too rare to trade. Every favor came with a chain, literal or figurative. None escaped the binding. The child who never grows had no name on record, no lineage, and no fingerprints. They were a myth the syndicates whispered about our runaway from the orphan syndicates. Too clever to be caught, too stubborn to be broken. Their weapon? Humility. They showed up during negotiations, not as a threat, but as a question. What are you still clinging to that's already cost you more than you admit? It made people uncomfortable. It made some very dead. But for those who listened, something strange happened. They walked away unbound. Chapter 2. The voice of the moon's shadow is a fixer for the Hollow's most ruthless boss, known for solving problems with whispers and poison. She believed in two things, loyalty and silence. She wore her chains with pride, kept polished, kept close. When the child appeared at her side during a blood deal with the Black Veil Gang, she didn't attack. She asked, "Why now?" The child smiled. "Because not all chains are meddlesome or habits polished by time." Then they walked into the fire of betrayal that night had planned and returned, alone, with everyone still breathing. That had never happened before. The voice followed. Chapter 3. Together they visited every gang, every debt house, every market that operated beneath unspoken rules. The child didn't preach. They listened. They told no one what to do, but asked the one question no one dared utter. What would it look like to stop playing the game? Most laughed. Some sat. Few wept. The voice of the moon's shadow, once a dealer in threats, became a midwife to truce. She translated the child's presence into terms people could understand. Then she made them feel it. The tide shifted, not with gunfire, with hesitation, with meetings that ended in shared meals, with grudges admitted, not glorified, and in time, with freedom offered without price. When the final family laid down arms, the hollow breathed for the first time in decades. Now, in the square that once held executions, a statue stands of two figures, one small, one cloaked, neither holding weapons, carved into the base. Not all chains are metal, some are habits polished by time. And below that, unbind yourself, begin again. And when conflict flares, as it always will, people remember, humility isn't surrender. It's the first step towards something unbreakable. Title: The Fire Between Us. Year: 239,102,563.5. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the fractured realm of Drenmer Hollow, bones grew from the ground like trees ancient, calcified remains of beasts and giants lost to time. People built homes between ribs, carved walls into vertebrae, and kindled hearths in empty sockets. The bone-dashed witness was one of few who could hear the old marrow sing, seer, a scavenger, a silent chronicler of pain and perseverance. She walked with a cane of fused femurs and eyes that glowed faintly in the rain. She never smiled. Then came the Ashwalker, trailing smoke and strange winds. He wore no mask, yet hid more than most. They said he was born of a dying fire and exhaled the last breath of a burned world. He arrived asking not for shelter, but for hell. The fire beneath the hollow is waking, he said. I can feel it. The witness touched the earth. It trembled, but she shook her head. Alone, you'll die in it. He didn't flinch. Then come with me. Chapter 2. They gathered the others' people with half-remembered gifts and scars that still itched at night. A bone trimmer who could shape walls with lullabies. A grief carver whose tears etched warnings into stone. A child who could weave fire into thread. Together, they mapped the hollow's center. At its core was an ancient furnace sealed long ago by those who believed fire could only destroy. Now, it boiled again. They descended. Monsters met them, formed of ash and sorrow. Memories. Regrets. The bone-lashed witness faced her own. Her mother's voice turned blade. Her lover's scream swallowed in flame. The Ashwalker stood beside her, arms open. Speak, he whispered. She did, and the monster cracked, but not by force, by understanding. She touched its face, and it crumbled into warmth. Chapter 3. At the heart of the hollow, they found the source. A living ember, vast and ancient, but scared. It pulsed with need, not rage. It had been abandoned, like all of them. We cannot seal it again, the Ashwalker said. No, the witness agreed. We can feed it, shape it, share it. Together, they opened new vents, channels, to spread the ember's heat across Drenmer. Fires lit. Not in fear, but in kinship. The land warmed, the bones hummed, the people healed, and at the center of it all, the witness and the walker built a cairn of fused ash and bone. On it, carved with soot and song, you can't own your power while resenting your scars. And around it, a circle formed, not of stone, of people, linked by story, bound by fire. Title: The Thread of the Forgotten Promise. Year: 238,461,538.2. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the divided city of Trestle, peace was amidst sold by swebblers and rebranded crime lords. The city wasn't run by government, but by factions, each with its own laws, flags, and borders. You didn't cross lines. You inherited them, and yet, scattered between the walls of fear and the gutters of desperation, children still played with string. The dream weaver noticed. She watched from the shadows, once amid herself a vigilante known for lacing dreams with warnings, hopes, and impossible truths. Her real name was long lost. Her vow, however, remained, to find the thread that could pull Trestle back together. It began with a whisper. The destiny you abandoned waits like a ghost just out of view. And then she found him, the vow made flesh. Chapter 2. He had once been a unifier, before the fractures, before the council fell, before his friends died in his place. He bore the ink of every faction across his skin, each symbol carved in apology. Now he worked odd jobs, moving crates no one claimed, delivering messages no one read. But the dream weaver found him weaving string between streetlights, connecting parts of the city long severed. Quietly, secretly, she sat beside him in silence. You were supposed to lead us, she finally said. I failed, he replied. Then lead us again. He did not, but the next morning, the lights along the string were lit. Chapter 3. The two began burning the city literally. A web of fire ran across the rooftops, alleyways, surrogates, each line glowing with a soft blue pulse. When followed, they brought people together in spaces once neutral, now sacred. A mechanic from the red zone met a baker from the gold streets. A smuggler from the rift knelt beside a medic from the heights. It didn't speak of treaties. They shared bread, both stories, more and losses neither side had dared name. The dream weaver recorded it all, not in cameras, but in dreams, and the vow made flesh. He stood back until the day someone tried to cut the string. He stood forward and stopped them without violence. His voice cracked as he spoke. Unity isn't absence of difference. It's presence of choice. In the center of Trestle, where the old courthouse once collapsed, a new monument rose not of stone, but of cord, a spiral of glowing thread, constantly woven anew by anyone who visits. Etched beneath, the destiny you abandoned waves like a ghost just out of view. And under that, look again. It's been waiting to walk with you. Trestle is not healed, but it is listening, and the string still shines. Title: The Wreckage That Dreamed. Here. 237,820,512.3. Era. Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Where the river Tau broke against the cliffs of Maine, the bones of a fallen spaceship lay scattered, its hull split like a ribcage, its wings lost to the salt winds. No one dared approach. Some said it still breathed, waiting to consume the next fool who mistook ruin for a relic. Han, the reluctant god, came anyway. He had once ruled a city of golden breath and silver hearts, until he abandoned it in silence. Not for shame, though he carried that, but for curiosity. A mortal ache that wouldn't leave. He came not to reclaim, but to learn. Waiting at the wreck was a girl in glass armor, Tess, the tear catcher. Her family had died when the ship fell. She returned each week to gather droplets from the ship's steam's condensed sorrow. Eternal, chemical, and sharp. You shouldn't be here, she said. You shouldn't be alone, he replied. Together they stepped inside the wreck, and the ship hummed. Chapter 2. Within the broken corridors, they found fragments, diaries etched into panels, maps drawn in spilled ink, a machine heart still pulsing with frostlight. The wreckage holds blueprints, Tarn whispered, but only those who dare to rebuild will see them. Death scoffed. We don't need gods. We need courage. He nodded. So they began. By moonlight and morning, they cleared debris, repaired gears with melted tear glass, invited others engineers, dreamers, orphans who had once cursed the sky. Slowly it changed. The ship rose inches, then feet. It would never fly again, but it would become something new. A sanctuary, a school, a beginning. But the deeper they rebuilt, the more they heard voices, not ghosts, warnings. The ship had crashed not from failure, but sabotage. Chapter 3. The saboteur had once believed the ship would erase history, rewrite the planet's memory, cleanse grief by force. When they failed, they embedded a final curse in the heart core. Death found it first, and fell, not dead, but cold. Harn carried her to the Chamber of Echoes. I gave up being a god, he said, but I never stopped being able to trade. He gave up his name, and the curse unraveled. Death awoke. The ship whispered a final time. Now you understand. The future is not salvage, it is forged. In time, the wreck became a village. Its name, Reclaim. At its gate, a plaque hung crooked, carved in salt glass. The wreckage holds blueprints, but only those who dare to rebuild will see them. And beside it, let the fall remind you risk is where reward begins. Title: The Hall of Listening Light. Year: 237,179,486.9. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadow of the fossilized supernova known as the Dead Star, people still spoke in hushed tones, afraid to disturb the remnants of cosmic grandeur. The colony of Lorith Prime had been built around the relic as a shrine, a museum, a mausoleum. Progress was paused out of reverence. Change was heresy. They called it preservation, but the dream of the Dead Star knew better. She walked barefoot through echoing marble halls, her silence louder than the scripts etched into every memorial wall. Her duty was to interpret the dreams stored in crystalline archives of emotions encoded by ancestors who believed eternity could be curated. Then came the Bone Scribe. He entered not as a pilgrim, but as a challenger. He placed a single phrase beneath the central pillar. You cannot carry tomorrow while worshipping the relics of yesterday. The words rang like a bell no one remembered hanging, and the dream stirred. Chapter 2. The Bone Scribe wasn't a revolutionary. He was a teacher. He gathered listeners in abandoned corridors and invited them to speak not about glory, but about grief, about boredom, about loneliness in the House of Legends. People wept. They whispered. They laughed for the first time in years. The dream of the Dead Star began recording again, not memories, but moments. The imperfect, unsanctioned, real. She asked children what they feared. She asked elders what they regretted. She asked everyone what they wished someone had once said to them, and with those answers she created the Hall of Listening Light, a space without rules, no statues, no silences imposed, only cushions, soft lights, and time. Chapter 3. The Council of Preservation resisted. Memory must remain unaltered, they declared. But it is not memory, the dream replied. It is stagnation. They summoned her to recant. She brought the people instead. One by one they stood not to protest, but to testify. A miner whose child had never been allowed into the archives. A poet whose verses had been deleted for reference in emotion. A technician who confessed to altering dialogues to preserve hope. And finally, the bone scribe stepped forward. He offered no words, only a mirror. He showed the council themselves, and they looked away. But it was too late. The hall had filled, and no one wanted to leave. Now, where the Death Star's light once hung still, a new chamber pulses alive with stories told aloud, not encoded, on its entrance arch, etched by the dream and the scribe together. You cannot carry tomorrow while worshipping the relics of yesterday. And below that, here we remember forward, where once silence ruled, now voices rise, and everyone is finally heard. Title: The Sky That Trembled. Year: 236,538,461.1. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Calderes was carved into the cliffside, high above a desert that whispered. It was a place of silence and glass, where dreams were taxed and ambition rationed by decree. Success without service was treason. Levan, known only as the stranger who remembers, returned on the wind after 20 years of exile. Once a scholar, Elian had uncovered secrets about the city's founding, namely, that its very laws were born of betrayal, that the balance, the council of societal arbiters, had rewritten history to ensure control, binding the people's word to public deeds alone. Elian had chosen to publish the truth, and paid for it. Now cloaked and quiet, they returned not with revenge, but with questions, and following them unseen. The Shadow Walker, an assassin of myths, a breaker of illusions, and maybe, just maybe, a friend. Chapter 2. Bodies began appearing across Calderes, not dead fractured, people frozen myth. Sentence, caught in memory loops as if their minds had been cut and scattered like light through crystal. Leon investigated quietly. The clues led to a hidden chamber beneath the Academy of Social Order. There, he found a memory cage, an ancient artifact used not to kill, but to imprison identity. One of the fragments bore his own handwriting. The Shadow Walker found him there. "I was told to end you," she said. "Why haven't you?" "Because even the sky must tremble before it births rain." Together they discovered the truth. The balance had revived the cage to punish personal ambition, those who dared innovate without permission, love without license, speak without approval. The city's silence was not tradition, it was fear. Chapter 3. Leon and the Shadow Walker leaked what they found, not in screams, but in symbols. Graffiti ballooned across the walls, fractured phrases, cream blue ink, maps to forbidden truths. The people began to ask questions, then act. The balance responded with curfews, then disappearances, until the storm came. Literally, the cliffs shook. Rain fell for the first time in a generation, and the people stood beneath it together. Leon took the stage in the central square. "I want to lead," they said, "only to remember, and to remind you that your voice is your vow." The Shadow Walker vanished into the mist, but before she did, she left a carving at the Academy gate. "Even the sky must tremble before it births rain." Below it smaller words shimmered. "Balance is not silence. It is shared song." And Calderes began to sing again. Title: The Flame Behind the Mask. Year: 235,897,435.6. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Hall of Citadel was not built, it was erased. Each wall, each hallway, each echo was carefully stripped of history until all that remained was utility and silence. It served the Council of Continuance, the ruling body that claimed to protect humanity by ensuring no one ever made the same mistake twice. Their secret was simple. No one learned from failure, because no one was allowed to remember it. Kira was a memory hacker in training, young, obedient, afraid. Her hands trembled when she recompiled files that wiped out rebellions before they were even understood. She was taught to trust the code more than her instincts, until she uncovered the name. The ash-lunged prophet figure purged from every record, and beside the name, a single phrase whispered into corrupted metadata. "You are the altar, and the offering stopped waiting for permission to burn." It lit a match in Kira's mind, and her fear began to smolder. Chapter 2. The water that remembers was more legend than rebel. Former architect of the Citadel's data structure, she had vanished decades ago, rumored dead, rumored divine. Now, She moved like moisture through cracks, reviving forgotten code, speaking in submerged networks, teaching others to remember failure so they could rise from it. Kira found her beneath the cooling towers, not with soldiers, with orphans. Each child recited a mistake they'd made and what they'd learned, not as confession, as identity. Kira wept, not for what she had done, for how little she had been allowed to know. The prophet arrived soon after, coughing blood and smoke, lungs scarred from a fire no one else survived. "You've read the code," he rasped. "Now write your own." She didn't hesitate. She burned her clearance Chapter 3. Together, they infiltrated the central vaults, not to destroy data, to unlock it. Failures that had been hidden, sabotage attempts that sparked peace, love affairs that saved regions, betrayals that revealed corruption. They strained it all. The citadel panicked. Truth flooded every corridor. The people did not riot. They reflected. And from those reflections, new structures were imagined, ones not built on denial, but resilience. The council tried to erase it all, but every time they wiped a file, another sprang up in its place. Kira became the flame, bearer of renewal. Prophet faded, whispering, "Let them burn what you've built so they can build it better." And in the center of the citadel, on the wall they once used to project propaganda, a new phrase emerged. "You are the altar, and the offerings stopped waiting for permission to burn." Under it, a flame-shaped console. Press it, and you access every failure once hidden, and every path it opened. And thus the citadel became what it feared most. A beacon. Title: The Syllabus of Dust. Year: 235,256,409.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The nation of Rin called itself the Forever. It preserved everything. Its monuments, its habits, even its mistakes. Nothing was ever demolished. New buildings were stacked atop the old, ceremonies rehearsed in layers, and lessons passed down so precisely that even the typos were canonized. Enter the Blade Dancer, not an assassin, an archivist of obsolete rituals, trained in the ceremonial art of decommissioning the unneeded. She was summoned when traditions began to rot from reverence. Her job wasn't to destroy it was to disassemble with grace. She arrived at the Academy of Perpetual Virtue, where nothing had been removed in 600 years. They greeted her with songs written by monks who had long since forgotten what notes meant. At her side walked the scribe of vanishing things. His quill was blank, his pages whiter than wind. He spoke only in footnotes. Together they were asked to restore the ceremony at infinite return. They decided to rewrite it instead. Chapter 2. The rewrite began with questions. Why must students balance upside-down textbooks on their heads while reciting the civic anthem? Why do we consecrate the Hall of Forgotten Platitudes annually if no one is allowed to read them? Why are 3 of the sacred pillars made of foam? The Blade Dancer was met with scowls. The scribe responded by transcribing the scowls into verse. They distributed it. Thou shalt not question what thy grandparents vaguely remembered. People laughed, quietly at first, then loudly, then nervously, but laughter is its own ceremony. So they continued. The old rituals were parodied, then reinterpreted, then replaced. Students performed the dance of necessary errors, in which every misstep was rewarded. Professors competed in who can unlearn faster. The academy trembled, and then invited them to teach. Chapter 3. The final ritual took place in the Hall of Statues, where the founders stood preserved in eternal stone grimaces. The Blade Dancer sliced her red ribbon across the room. It wasn't an attack. It was a curtain call. Behind the statues, she unveiled mirrors. People stepped up and saw themselves, not legacies, possibilities. The scribe inscribed one final phrase across the dome. Legacy is not stone, it is the echo of courage in unseen moments. And below it, in smaller script, may this lesson vanish when it is no longer needed. The statues remained, but the mirrors stayed longer, and somewhere in the archives a blank page waits, smiling. Title: The Stillness That Spoke First. Year: 235,615,384.3. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The heroes of old Earth were loud blazing symbols of hope, crashing through injustice with thunder in their fists. But in the aftermath of the Shatter Wars, when silence stretched farther than ruins, something changed. The Time Bender had no catchphrase. She did not punch villains or pose for crowds. She simply paused time just enough to listen. Her presence was a rumor, a woman who showed up at moments of collapse, not to fix, but to feel. People whispered that if you truly needed to be heard, she'd find you by listening to the ache behind your silence. One of those whispers reached Drake, a new kind of hero, not born with power, but forged from panic and pressure. He wore a mask not to hide his identity, but to muffle the questions he never let himself ask. When the key that bites landed in his lap, an artifact capable of unlocking dimensional folds, it pulsed with voices. Too many, too loud. He wanted answers. Instead, he got her. Hepatitu. She appeared during a blackout in Sector Ven. He was trying to stabilize a collapsing fold, shouting into the columns for assistance. Everyone had advice. No one listened, not even him. She didn't speak. She touched his shoulder and stilled everything. Time froze except for his breath. He turned to her, trembling. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." The key pulsed again, and this time Rake listened, not to her, to the echoing cries of the dimension about to break the trapped, the forgotten, the unheard. They weren't asking to be saved. They were asking to be seen. And so he stood still. Chapter 3. The fold held, not by force, but by recognition. He tuned his device not to repair, but to receive. A frequency not of domination, but of dignity. The key that bites opened not a portal, but a channel, and the people trapped in between stepped out not as victims, but as witnesses. The world tried to spin its story Rake as the lone savior. He refused. He gave the stage to those who had waited. He stepped aside, and should the time bender vanished again, later in the ruins of the shattered broadcast tower. A monument rose, no grand pose, just a bench, a place to sit, to listen, etched along the top rail. Growth comes from standing still in the presence of what you fear, and beneath that, sometimes the loudest change begins in silence. People still seek the time bender, but they rarely find her. Instead, they find each other, because she left behind not a legacy, but a space. And in that space, they learned how to truly hear. Title: The Shelter of Silver Lines. Year: 233,974,358.6. Hira. Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beyond the known territories, where maps bled into guesswork, and wind wrote landmarks daily, stood a ring of stones, no car cover for Denmark. They called it the Fade. Inside lived those who had disappeared not by magic, but by choice. Along them the map-maker of lost lands. She charted only what had been forgotten ruined cities, abandoned names, feelings too brittle for the world above. Her maps pulsed faintly with memory. Some glowed when touched by tears. She lived alone until the mirror scribe arrived. He carried nothing but a shattered lens and a journal of questions. He did not ask for directions, only stories. "Why record a place that no longer exists?" he asked. "Because it still echoes," she replied. They built a table between their shelters, and began to share. Chapter 2. The Fade, once silent, began to hum. Others joined. A grieving widower, a child whose voice returned only in sleep, a knight who laid down their blade because it no longer dreamed. Each came bearing what they thought was failure. A mapmaker gave them blank parchments. The mirror scribe listened and etched their silence into something sacred. What emerged wasn't a city, but a space. Soft walls of wind, fires that warmed without burning, a ritual of listening. One evening, the child asked, "Why do you make a place for broken things?" The scribe replied, "What feels like failure may simply be wisdom in waiting." Chapter 3. The world beyond took notice. Scouts arrived. They saw no defenses, no banners, only vulnerability woven into every stone. They called it weakness. And then the storm came. The Fade should have shattered, but it held, not with force, but with connection. Each resident knew the other's story, held it like a sacred thread. They formed a circle, palms open, stories whispered as shields. The storm passed, and for the first time, the Fade appeared on outer maps, not as a warning, as a haven. The mapmaker placed a symbol on her chart, two hands clasped beneath a mirrored sky. The mirror scribe carved the final message. What feels like failure may simply be wisdom in waiting. Below it in smaller glyphs. The space is yours when you're ready to return. And people did, one story at a time.